Welcome to Some of My Best Friends. A phenomenon has been sweeping this country for the last few years. Alex Haley didn't exactly start it, but he gave it a great deal of impetus. People all over the country in dusty research libraries and in parlors and in kitchens are searching for their roots. Our guest today is Charles Bernstein. Chuck is a Chicago attorney and a searcher for his roots and for other people's roots. The Jewish Genealogical Society is extremely active and has turned up some really heartwarming and marvelous results from digging. Welcome. We're glad to have you with us. It's really an interesting phenomenon. I think that everybody who's involved in it is somehow enriched by it. Chuck, I wish you would tell us to begin with what's in it for you. What you get out of this searching? What have you found as a result of the digging that you have done for your roots that has enriched you, has made you feel better?
It's the ability to go back and find out where your family came from, what they did in the old country, who they were related to, even as we've just seen with the picture of my great-grandfather, what our ancestors looked like. Ironically, I've been interested in genealogy for about 15 or 16 years, and I only discovered that picture earlier this year, about 6 months ago.
And you tell me it was taken in Chicago, right?
Yes. My great-grandfather came to Chicago about 1888. He settled in South Chicago, which at that time was not part of the city of Chicago. And the picture was taken in South Chicago.
How far back have you been able to trace your own family?
At various levels, depending upon the side and how thoughtful they were to leave records behind them. On one side, it was a rabbinic family, so there were more records available, and we were able to go back to my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, who would have been born about 1680 or 1700. Other sides, I can't go beyond my great-grandparents, and then everywhere in between, depending upon the line and where they came from and how early in the generations the family came to America.
One of the things that I noticed, one of the members of your group who is also searching for her roots and who is an adopted child, and she said the fact that she was adopted made it no less fascinating to her to know who and what these people were way back before she had a chance to know them.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting facets of adoption, at least in Illinois, and we recently had the question come up in the office. It's a question whether the adopted child is still an heir of his natural parent, and generally he is, so that the adopted child really can tie into two families. He's an heir of his adopting family, and he's also an heir of his natural family. But adopted people have different levels of interest. Some feel that, well, they're adopted, so they really aren't interested in their new family. Others say that, well, my blood family didn't want me anyway, so I'm not interested in them. And others, of course, have the insatiable desire to find out about them.
If one wants to start searching, and we've all, I think, and we've talked on this program many times, in fact, you and I have talked on this program about the regrets that many of us have that relatives have already died whom we didn't plumb the depths of. We didn't ask them, tell me everything you can remember. I think of grandfather that I had when I was a child. I wish now, that I had been smart enough then to sit down with him and say, tell me everything you remember. Where do you start?
Well, obviously,
begin the whole thing?
Obviously you start with your older relatives. However, I've never been as interested in oral history as many genealogists. I'm more interested in public records and searching the records. An older relative is not necessarily the panacea to your paternity, because the chances are that that person doesn't know any more than his father and grandfather, and then he'll say to you, oh, if only my father were alive. I wish that I had interviewed him. I met a relative of mine who was about an 85-year-old man, very prominent man, and I had waited several years to meet him. And we started talking about the family, and I asked him some questions, and he said, if only my father were alive, he really could have told you everything. So naturally, they're a good source to start with, but it isn't necessarily the total answer to your quest.
Well, a lot of people have a few clues. You know, like you may know the name of a small town somewhere. You may have just very little shreds. How do you take those shreds and begin to turn it into a real search?
A small town, were you referring to Europe, for example?
Perhaps, yeah.
There are, of course, part of the problem with Eastern Europe is that the town could have been in a number of different countries in the last 100 years. It could have been a part of Russia or Poland or Austria or Hungary or Czechoslovakia, all the same town within the last 100 or so years. There are gazetteers at the library that can guide you in trying to locate the name of the town, and also one of the members of the Jewish Genealogical Society of Illinois has a map service that is made available to you. Once you get the name of the town, there are other sources which have histories of the town. There are articles in various Jewish encyclopedias. There are memorial books published by survivors of these towns who came to live in the United States and elsewhere. And there are also organizations of natives of the towns. I'm speaking mainly in the Jewish community, called Landsmannschaften associations. And these are people from the same town who got together for self-help and fellowship and socializing. And years ago, before the Nazi Holocaust, they would also send money and food and clothing back to the old town to help their people who hadn't come over. And they also have possibly records and memorabilia from the town.
I think there are a lot of people who assume that perhaps it would be futile to begin to search because their roots are in those areas where the Holocaust did occur and that records were destroyed, that you wouldn't be able to get that past the Second World War. Is that so?
Well, in a lot of cases, they have been destroyed, and if you were one of the unlucky ones, the records of whose family had been destroyed, then yes, you're out of luck. But if you keep digging, I know I've always found that if I just keep at it, eventually I'll find something. Now, as far as the Holocaust goes, the Nazis, of course, kept meticulous records of the prisoners in the concentration camps, and there are various libraries where you can research for this sort of thing. There also are a couple of archives that contain records of names of people who perished in the Holocaust, and I found relatives of mine who have data sheets in these archives. So there are sources that have this information.
Okay, most people, Chuck, you've been through law school and you know your way around a library. Most people don't. Most people do not have the kind of research skills that when you say there are libraries, you know, and you can go to the library. Most people don't know how to do that. Take me through, step by step, where do we start? Supposing someone wants to find his or her, say, grandparents and then great-grandparents, where do you begin? Would joining the Jewish Genealogical Society be a good first step?
It would help because genealogy can be a very lonely hobby. The study of a family is a very personal thing, and a lot of people are offended by it. Genealogy is kind of like olives. You either love it or you hate it. And if you love it, it's like quicksand. You get in so deep that you can't get out. You keep going back a generation and off to another branch. Joining the Jewish Genealogical Society of Illinois would be a good start, to meet with other people who have had similar experiences. Interviewing older relatives would, of course, be a good start. If you're lucky enough to have relatives who lived in Chicago and who have died here, going to the cemetery and looking at their tombstones would be helpful. Now, particularly in the area of tombstones, Jewish people have a little bit of an advantage, even though our European records are not as well preserved as those of other ethnic groups. As far as tombstones go, we have a wonderful advantage, and that is that the traditional tombstone of a Jewish person has his Hebrew name, and the Hebrew name customarily gives the person's first name, and then it says son of or daughter of, and then it gives the deceased person's father's name. So it will say Abraham ben, or son of Isaac, or Deborah bat, or daughter of Jacob. And there you automatically know the person's father's name. So even if that person didn't come to this country, you still know his name. So that's a very good start.
Go ahead. What else could you do beyond, you know, beginning to travel and making it very elaborate? Cemeteries, family members, then the Jewish Genealogical Society, and you have an exchange forum, don't you? A listing that
yes,
where you can advertise and say, my name is so-and-so, and I am looking for such and such a family.
Right. In the publication search, there's what's called a column called Suchen Mishpacha, which means the search for the family. And people put in advertisements saying what their name and address is, and then the surnames that they're interested in and the towns that these people came from. That's another possibility. Then you have to go to the library to learn more about the town, and then you start corresponding. Genealogy, if you can control it, does not have to be a very expensive hobby. The only costs involved are your gasoline to go to the cemetery and your postage, and occasionally you might want to purchase a death certificate or a birth certificate of somebody.
Let's take a look at this that is a certificate that is in your family archives that I think is fascinating. We'll take a look at this and you describe for us what this is and how you came to possess it.
This is a naturalization paper of my grandfather, whose name was the same as mine. I'm named for him.
Here's
Charles
where it says,
B. Bernstein.
Charles B. Bernstein, right here. The 16th day of October, let's see, 1896, right.
He was admitted to citizenship in the criminal court of Cook County. Now, naturalization records are another source, and that's a whole topic in itself. Today, only the federal court system has jurisdiction over naturalizations, so it's very easy. You just write to the Naturalization and Immigration and Naturalization Service, INS, and they'll pretty much be able to give you the record. But before 1906, an immigrant could go into any court in the county where he resided. And in Cook County at this time, there were 4 different courts. There was the criminal court, the circuit court, the superior court, and the county court. So that if your family came early to America, on one hand it's an advantage, but on the other hand, especially in Chicago, it's a nightmare to get a naturalization paper.
This is fascinating because in this document where he had to agree, you know, to become a citizen of the United States, he had to renounce all allegiance and fidelity to every prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, whatever. And it is written in here, to be very specific, the Tsar of Russia.
Yes. Well, of course, that was the cause of most of the Jews of Eastern Europe leaving, was the Tsar. And he also was the cause of many of the name changes among Jewish people, which has caused a great problem for the genealogists.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because that's fascinating. And so many Jews have, well, most ethnic groups, I think, there are all sorts of long Polish names that did not translate exactly correctly when they got into the United States. But many of the Jews, there was such a language problem at Ellis Island, was there not? And that the people who were passing them through just arbitrarily assigned them names. You'll be whatever.
Yes, there were various reasons. They were arbitrarily assigned names. The person would say in Yiddish, when he was asked, what's your name, and he didn't understand what what's your name meant, so he may have said in Yiddish, I don't know. And somehow that sounded like a name which the immigration officer put down.
I also noticed in some of the Jewish Genealogical Society literature that one big problem was that the name, it would be entered, something would be entered in the wrong line, and where the occupation was supposed to go, such as Schneider, meaning tailor, it would go in on the name line, and that would end up being that person's name, which is why there are so many Schneiders in this country. Of course. Interesting. What are some of the others like that were mistranslated?
Well, one of the main, well, you would have a person, they would say, what's your name? And he would say in the traditional Hebrew formula, my name is Nathan ben David. So they give him the surname Davis. Or you have a whole category of Jewish surnames called matronymical names, like Malkin, which means the daughter of Malka, or Perlis, meaning the daughter or the child of Pearl. One of the main reasons for the name changes was that in Russia, Russian law exempted an only son from military service. And the military service there was really horrible. It was 25 years. And of course, for the Jewish men who got conscripted, they would be subjected to all kinds of torture and persecution on top of just having to serve in Siberia for 25 years. It wasn't very pleasant. So a lot of them, in order to avoid military service, they would change their name and say, oh, well, I'm the only son of this family. And one of the problems I had initially, and it set me back about 4 years, was that my great-great-grandfather was named Rabinowitz, and I knew that he had relatives named Lipschitz, but I couldn't figure out how they were related. And I knew he had one brother, whom I assumed was named Rabinowitz. And it took me several years to learn that the one brother was named Lipschitz, and that the Lipschitz relatives were indeed descended from a brother, and not from a sister.
Let's talk a little bit about the Mormon church facilities, because that's of tremendous value, is it not, to anyone who's on a genealogical search?
Yes, it's terrific. They spend, I think, in the millions of dollars per year going around both the United States and other parts of the world, microfilming all kinds of genealogical records. It's part of the Mormon religion, which believes that the Mormon individual has a duty to convert his ancestors, who are now deceased, to Mormonism. And as a result, they want to find out who their ancestors are, and they aren't particular about who they are. They've been able to microfilm a lot of records of the Eastern European Jewish communities, and they're the only ones that have these records. And they have a giant mountain in Salt Lake City that in which they store all of these records. But
literally a mountain.
Literally, it's stored in a mountain, but you don't have to go to Salt Lake City to get it, because they're nice enough to have reading rooms around the country where you can go, and they have a card catalog on microfilm of their holdings, and then for a small amount, a couple of dollars, you can write to Salt Lake City, order the microfilm reel in, and search for the people in that particular town who that may have come from your family.
Now, there are repository libraries around in this area, are there not, where you can go and tell them what you need, and they can...
With the Mormons?
Yes, and that they can get hold of those.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant, these reading rooms.
Well, so that someone could go to his or her local library and find out where those are located. I mean, I'm trying to give people, you know, a way to do it.
Do you mean you mean where to find out where the Mormon reading room is? Where to find out
where you can get to the...
Well, you just look in the telephone book under Church of Latter-day Saints, I believe it's called, and that will have it. But I suppose any local history department in a library would be able to refer you to the nearest one.
And that's a good place to start, isn't it? Or if not start, at least to
continue. I don't know that would be a good starting point, but it would be a good place to continue on in your quest.
Let's take a quick look, Chuck, if we could, at this enormous visual that we have here, which we are going to show only as an example of how complex this family tree business can become. Tell us whose this is and how it was devised.
I hope this doesn't discourage too many of our viewers, but...
well, most people won't be able to fill in that much.
This is the family tree of the famous Jewish colonial Revolutionary War hero, Chaim Solomon. And Chaim Solomon was born in 1740, and this is just one page of maybe 20 or 30 pages of a family tree of his descendants, and there must be about 2,000 to 3,000 names of people on his family tree. And I found in my experience researching other families, both mine and others, that if you start about 1800, you will accumulate, the average family will accumulate between 1,000 and 2,000 names on a family tree. It's just colossal, the amount of proliferation that the average couple can generate in a few generations. This tree, incidentally, came from a wonderful book.
Here, which we have here, don't we?
We just happen to have it here.
Let's take a look at this, too.
Called Americans of Jewish Descent. And this was compiled over a period of several decades by the Dean of American Jewish Genealogists Rabbi Malcolm H. Stern, who is also president of the Jewish Genealogical Society, which is based in New York. It's a national organization, and I happen to be on the board. This book contains about 50,000 names, and it tries to develop the family trees, the descendants of anybody who was Jewish and who was in America prior to 1840.
That's phenomenal. While we're showing books, we're not going to give all the documentation, but we just want to show that there is a library available, that if you want to start, there's someplace to start. This one is called From Generation to Generation. It's by Arthur Kurzweil, and it's subtitled How to Trace Your Jewish Genealogy and Personal History. This
if I can interrupt you for a moment.
Sure.
Arthur also is the co-publisher of Toledot, which is a national Jewish genealogical quarterly that he and Stephen Siegel have been publishing. It comes out of New York, and they've developed the first Jewish genealogical quarterly or public periodical since pre-World War II Germany.
This is called The Unbroken Chain. This is by Neil Rosenstein, and this is subtitled Biographical Sketches and the Genealogy of Illustrious Jewish Families from the 15th to the 20th Century. Who knows? This might have been illustrious. Right?
This is a very fascinating and important book because it traces Jewry's royal family, the Katzenelnbogen family, which is descended from Saul Katzenelnbogen, who, according to legend, was the Jewish king for a day of Poland. And there are many people that you would never think are relatives who are descendants of this family. Helena Rubinstein, her second cousin once removed, Martin Buber.
Is that right?
Many famous rabbinic families, some of the Anglo-Jewish nobility, such as the Rothschilds, and even people that I've met in Chicago in my everyday life who are descendants of this famous
who are illustrious.
family.
This is called Finding Our Fathers. It's by Dan Rottenberg. It's subtitled A Guidebook to Jewish Genealogy. It's also a useful book, I know, because I've spoken to the author on that one.
This was the first of the genre of Jewish genealogical books, and I was a consultant to Dan on the publication.
Chuck, tell me what happens when, at one of your meetings, when someone comes in with a find. Someone has discovered something. What occurs?
Well, it's very exciting. It's nice to be able to share an exciting discovery with someone who's interested. As I said, most people are just interested in their own families, and some people aren't even interested in their own family. So when you can meet with people like Art Kurzweil and Dan Rottenberg and Neil Rosenstein and Malcolm Stern and share some of this information, it's a very exciting thing, and it's nice, it's gratifying to be able to share such a personal thing with someone. It's a mystery. Genealogy is a giant treasure hunt.
I've heard many blacks say that one of the things, or maybe the thing, that the Roots phenomenon, the book and the movie and everything connected with it, did for them was to make them feel part of a history. That they no longer felt just kind of floating and disconnected, that they felt connected.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. As a matter of fact, Jewish people before the current craze kind of felt like that. Oh, my family came from Europe and my grandparents didn't speak English, so how could I ever find out anything about my genealogy? And as a result, in the early years when I was involved in this, you got mainly a negative reaction among Jewish people. And now what with Roots having opened the door, people understand that there are sources available and that all of us can turn up something if we try hard enough.
One of the things also that Alex Haley conveys, and I think it's really been a marvelous thing, is the sense that all of this belongs to us. I mean, if you have a history, if I have a history, that's mine. It's my possession, and there's really no reason why I shouldn't have it. That the mists of history should not deny it to me if I want it.
Yes, it's very frustrating when it does. Like when you go out to the cemetery and the tombstone doesn't have the father's name on it. It's very frustrating. But one interesting thing about genealogy is that it personalizes history. For example, we all study in school about the English kings, and there are some people that can name every English king from William the Conqueror on down. but you don't know who your own great-grandfather is.
On the subject, Chuck, we are introducing today a new feature on our program, and we call it Signature. I think you'll see why it's quite appropriate. And I'm pleased now to introduce Rabbi Ben Zion Kaganoff.
My name is Rabbi Kaganoff, and this is Signature, a program dealing with your Jewish family name. One of the most remarkable things that is in our possession is our family name, and the name tells us a great deal about our background. And it's interesting to note that hereditary names in Judaism are only about 200 years old. Before that time, a person might be called Abraham the baker, and his son would be called Isaac the winemaker. And there was no relationship as far as their family name. But in the 1780s, beginning in the Austrian Empire, Jews assumed family names for the first time. Napoleon extended this into the German and French communities, and it became part of the Russian Empire in the early 1800s, and finally in the middle of the 19th century it spread throughout Poland. And a few years ago I wrote a book, a dictionary of Jewish names and their history, and in this book I was able to categorize all Jewish family names into 11 groups. And I hope in the course of these discussions to share with you some of the facts in each of these categories. Some of them, of course, are basic to all family names. There are 4 basic categories: patronymics, the name of the father; occupational, the occupation that we have; descriptive names; geographic names. But in Judaism and in Jewish background, we have a very interesting assortment of names, and I would like to share some of them with you. For example, we have the name Abraham, which in our tradition becomes Abram's son, O-H-N, if it is a Germanic background, or it might become Abramowitz, a Polish background, or Abramski, or Abramov. Or it might become Abrams. This is true, of course, of other names. It might be Yankel, which is a nickname for Jacob, and it becomes Yankel's son, Yankelevich, and so on. As I mentioned before, every family name is a story in itself, and it is remarkable that it becomes really a detective story. And therefore, I invite you to send me your name, and we hope in the course of these discussions to find the solution and the answer for your family name.
I'd like to reissue that invitation that Rabbi Kaganoff just mentioned. Send us your comments and or your names to some of my best friends, Chicago Board of Rabbis, 618 South Michigan, Chicago, Illinois, 60605. Rabbi Kaganoff will be back with another signature. Chuck Bernstein, thank you so much. It's really been fascinating. There's so much more to talk about. We could go on and on and on, way back into history. Maybe we'll do that another time. Thank you again.
Thank you, Bonnie.
And thanks to you for being with us. Join us again next week, won't you, for some of my best friends.
Petty quarrels, trifling differences.